Her hands were burned and bleeding when the rancher bought her. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just stood there, quiet, with eyes that had seen too much for 12 years. Folks said Elias Boone had lost his mind, spending his last dollars on a child no one dared touch. But 3 weeks later, that same girl would save his life, expose a buried secret, and bring justice to a town that had forgotten the meaning of mercy. The wind howled through the dry bones of Crescent Hollow as Elias Boone stepped off his wagon. His boots hit the dusty street like thunder no one cared to hear anymore. The auction barn loomed ahead, the same old place where folks sold cattle, mules, and sometimes things that should never be sold. Inside, a line of filthy children stood in the shadows. The logging camp up north had sent them down. Excess mouths, the foreman called them. One by one, they were barked off to strangers for coins. Then came her turn, a small girl, 12 maybe, hair chopped short like a punishment, face smeared in soot, her palms blistered and raw, like someone had made her carry firewood in hell. She saw. Didn't blink when the auctioneer shoved her forward. "This one don't talk," he grunted. "Too quiet for her own good. Been working since she could stand. We'll start at $10. The room was still. No hands raised. No one moved except one, Elias Boone. "10," he said. People turned. "Boone?" someone muttered. "You serious? You got debts up to your neck." "She'll work," he said calmly. "That's all I need." The gavel hit. The deal was made. Outside, the girl didn't ask questions, didn't look back, just climbed onto his wagon like she didn't care if it rolled off a cliff. Elias tossed her a wool blanket. "What's your name?" She was silent. He didn't push, just said, "You'll sleep in the loft. Water's by the trough. You run. I don't chase. You stay. You work and you eat." Still nothing. But her eyes flickered like someone who once believed in something. Long ago. That night, the sky over Boone Ranch cracked with dry thunder. Elias sat by the fire, watching the girl from the corner of his eye as she curled into the hay, hands tucked under her chin. He poured 2 cups of coffee, placed one by the steps of the loft. A few seconds later, he heard her shift, then a whisper, faint, like wind through pine. "Clara." He looked up. "My name's Clara." Far away, in a church basement 2 counties north, a man with a silver tooth lit a cigarette, glanced at a photograph, and whispered, "She's missing." His partner asked, "You think she'll talk?" He smiled. "Not unless she wants him dead." The next morning, Boone Ranch looked like it always did. Half-broken fences, 3 cows that wouldn't fatten, and a barn roof that leaked more than it sheltered. Elias Boone stood by the porch, sipping bitter coffee, watching Clara drag a bucket to the trough. Her hands trembled. Not from weakness, but memory. Every time she touched water, her skin twitched, like her burns still screamed beneath the surface. But she made no sound, just kept working. Quiet, deliberate. Like she'd learned long ago. Suffering is better swallowed than shared, Elias noticed. Didn't say a word. Later that afternoon, a rider appeared over the ridge, lean, sharp-eyed, and carrying a leather satchel. Miss Lorna Graves, the new schoolteacher, from Tennessee. She dismounted with the poise of someone who'd held a shotgun longer than a pen. Her dress was plain, but her stare cut through lies like a blade. "I heard you brought home a girl," she said bluntly. Elias nodded. "She's 12. Name's Clara." "Quiet." "Too quiet," Lorna muttered, scanning the girl from afar. "Like a rabbit that forgot how to run. She works, eats, doesn't cause trouble. That's what worries me." Lorna turned to go, then paused. "She's welcome at my classroom. You can't fix a child by handing them a shovel. Sometimes you gotta hand them a book." Elias nodded, more to himself than her. That night, Clara sat on the steps of the loft, clutching a worn-out tin cup. Elias walked over and sat beside her, said nothing, Just placed a small, beaten-up book in her lap. Little Women. Found it in town last year, he said. Never read it. Figured it was too soft for a rancher. Clara stared at the cover. Something flickered in her expression. Something he hadn't seen since she arrived. A memory, maybe. A past. She whispered, "My mama used to read that." Then she looked up, and for the first time her voice cracked. They burned the book. And her. Elias felt his chest tighten, like someone had reached in and squeezed the air out of his ribs. He didn't ask who they were, didn't need to. 3 days passed. Clara didn't speak again, but she started humming when she thought no one was listening. Soft tunes, like lullabies dragged through broken dreams. Lorna visited once more, bringing a basket of bread and 2 worn pencils. "You should let her write," she said. "I barely have ink." Then let her bleed it out, 1 word at a time. On the 5th night, just past midnight, Elias heard a sound, sharp, like a blade sliding free of its sheath. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The barn door was cracked open. Inside, Clara stood frozen. Her hands were wrapped in burlap. Her eyes locked on a man who lay unconscious on the hay floor, a stranger, bloodied and breathing heavy. Next to him was a knife and a silver tooth that shimmered under moonlight. Clara turned to Elias, her face pale. "I didn't kill him," she whispered, "but he came to kill you." The barn smelled of blood and sweat. Moonlight poured in through the broken slats like judgment from the heavens. Elias Boon stood at the threshold, rifle aimed steady. Clara didn't flinch. She stood over the man's body like a ghost guarding a secret. He was still alive, barely. A gash on his temple bled slow. His fingers twitched near the blade Clara had kicked away. "Who is he?" Elias asked, voice low. Clara stared at the man. Her lips trembled, but her jaw locked. "He followed me from Redding. He was the foreman." Elias's heart sank. "The logging camp?" Clara nodded. "The man who made us carry firebrands barehanded, who called us rats, who said I'd never leave alive." Elias stepped forward slowly, eyes never leaving the man's silver tooth gleaming through cracked lips. "You knew he'd come?" "I hoped he wouldn't." Her voice cracked, barely more than breath. "But I dreamed every night he would." They tied the man with mule rope and dragged him into the cellar behind the ranch house. Elias didn't say much, but his hands shook as he nailed the door shut. The girl had brought him more than trouble. She'd brought vengeance into his home. Next morning, Lorna Graves came again. This time, Elias didn't let her off her horse. Before saying, "We need help," she raised a brow. "The girl?" "No, the past she's running from." Clara stood nearby, watching a pair of crows fight over dry bread. Her face unreadable, Lorna dismounted slowly. "Tell me everything," she said. They sat around the kitchen table. Elias laid out the truth. The girl, the burns, the foreman in the cellar. Lorna's face grew tighter with every word. "I knew that. Camp was rotten," she muttered. "Half the orphans in this region disappear into it." She looked at Clara. "We could ride into town, speak to Sheriff Deacon. He's hard but fair." Clara shook her head sharply. "He's not fair. He sold the contracts. He said, 'Girls don't need schools. They need calluses.'" Lorna's face paled. "Then we can't go through town," Elias said. "But we can go through truth." That night, Elias found Clara sitting by the fire again, the Little Women book clutched in her lap. He sat beside her. "I once lost a child," he said quietly. 8 years ago. Scarlet fever took her in 3 days. My wife followed 2 months later. Since then, all I've done is patch fences and count regrets." Clara didn't look at him, but her fingers clenched the book tighter. "I thought buying you was saving you," he said. "But now I think maybe you were sent here to save me." She turned slowly. Her eyes glistened. Then a sound echoed from the cellar, a knock, one, then another, then a muffled voice. "You think she's the only one who knows?" Elias stood, rifle in hand. "What does that mean?" Clara whispered. Lorna answered from the door. It means they're coming. The night was too quiet. Elias sat on the edge of the porch, rifle balanced across his lap, while Clara stood by the doorway, her hands wrapped tight in cloth, staring at the moon like it owed her answers. From the cellar came that voice again. You? Think she's the only one who knows? It echoed through the wooden floor like a curse slipping between the cracks. Elias stood. I'm going down. Clara stepped in front of him. He lies with every breath. That may be, Elias said, but I've seen more men die from silence than from bullets. He lit a lantern and unbarred the cellar door. The air down there was thick with dirt and rot. The silver-toothed man sat against the stone wall, eyes swollen, mouth cracked. You made a mistake, Boon, he rasped. She ain't just a girl, she's a name. Elias narrowed his eyes. Speak plain. The man grinned. That girl? She's the one who set fire to Camp Redwind, killed a foreman in his sleep. They've got a price on her head from here to Nevada. Upstairs, Clara stood frozen. She could hear every word through the cracks in the floor. She didn't blink, didn't cry, just waited. Elias climbed back up, jaw tight, eyes storming. You started the fire? He asked quietly. Clara looked at him, voice flat. They tied my friend to a beam and laughed as he burned. I lit the rest so they wouldn't laugh again. Elias didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't turn away either. Finally, he said, You're still 12. That should have never been your burden. She whispered, It was mine or no one's. At dawn, smoke rose on the horizon, thin, black, controlled, but enough to make any rancher's spine tighten. Lorna arrived at full gallop, men coming from the east, 5 riders. Dust says they're not merchants. Elias cursed under his breath. They found her. Clara gripped the porch rail. I won't run. You'll ride, Elias snapped. There's a difference. Lorna dismounted, loading shells into her saddlebag. They'll search this ranch first. Elias nodded. Then we leave them something to find. An hour later, Clara's hands trembled as Elias placed a worn-out revolver in her palm. Ever shot before? No. Good. Means you'll listen. She nodded. He knelt in front of her, touched her shoulder. You don't owe them silence anymore. You don't owe anyone anything. Her lip trembled. Then she whispered, If I die, don't bury me in firewood. Elias looked confused. She blinked. That's what they did to the others. The hooves came fast. Dust clouds rolled over the hills like thunder made of bone. 5 riders, black hats, dusters, guns on both hips, no badges. The kind of men who didn't knock, they claimed. And as they reached Boon Ranch, Clara Boon, no longer just a child, no longer someone's labor, stood with a gun in her hand and a story in her eyes. And that story was just getting started. Dust curled like a serpent behind the riders as they approached Boon Ranch. 5 men. One with a scar that split his cheek clean open. One with a bandolier of silver shells. One too young, too twitchy. One with no eyes for the land, only for the hunt. And one with a grin as cold as the barrel of a forgotten rifle. They didn't knock, didn't ask. They rode right up to the porch and dismounted like they'd done this before. Elias Boon stepped forward, calm but ready. Clara stood just behind him, hidden by the shadow of the doorway, revolver tight in her hand. You Elias Boon? The leader asked. I am. We're here for the girl. Elias crossed his arms. Ain't got any girls for sale. The leader's grin widened. Didn't ask if she was for sale. Inside the house, Clara's heart thundered like hooves on a dry plain, but her hands stayed steady. Lorna stood near the back window, holding her shotgun like it was part of her bones. She... Got a name now? Lorna whispered. Clara nodded slowly. Clara Boon. Lorna almost smiled. Outside, the leader tilted his head. Name's Bledsoe. We were told you bought a runaway from Red Wind Camp, girl with a fire problem. Elias didn't blink. I bought a soul who needed saving. If you came looking for fire, you'll find it. Bledsoe's men chuckled, but it wasn't laughter. It was warning. Scarface stepped forward. You really want to die over a girl who ain't yours? Elias shifted slightly. I didn't buy her to own her. I bought her to set her free. Bledsoe's smile faded, and for a moment, there was silence. Then came the voice from behind the half-open door. I'm right here. Clara stepped out onto the porch, revolver in both hands, arms steady as stone. Bledsoe blinked. Well, Hellfire, he muttered. You really do have her backbone. Clara's voice was flat. I told your boss I'd die before I went back. I still mean it, Scarface laughed. Then we'll help you along. He reached for his holster. Crack. Lorna's shotgun roared from the window. Scarface screamed, his gun flying from his shattered hand. The others dove behind their horses. Elias pulled Clara back inside, slammed the door, and bolted it. Now they know we ain't bluffing. The house shook with return fire. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Dust and smoke filled the room. Lorna reloaded like a machine. Elias covered the back. Clara crouched near the fire, her eyes wild but focused. We can't hold them off forever, she said. Elias nodded grimly. We don't need forever. We just need until they start doubting. Doubting what? That she was worth coming after. Outside, Bledsoe wiped blood from his cheek. This ain't some girl, he hissed to his men. She's the one who burned Redwind, the one who made the big men sweat. We bring her in, we don't just get paid, we get power. He raised his hand. Next volley, he said. Then we light their world. Inside, Elias looked at Clara. You still want to run? She looked out the window, then at him. No, she said quietly. I want to finish what I started. He nodded once. Then we ride at dusk. The sun dipped low, painting the land in gold and fire. Inside Boon Ranch, silence had settled. A fragile silence, the kind that hangs before lightning strikes. Clara sat on the floor beside the window, wrapping a bandage around her own arm. A splinter from the earlier gunfire had cut her deep, but she didn't wince. Not anymore. Elias paced by the fireplace, jaw tight, eyes scanning a torn map of the hills. Lorna loaded her last 2 shells. That's it, she said. No more ammo. Elias didn't look up. Then we make these count. The plan was simple. Not easy, just simple. Lorna would ride out first, draw them toward the bluffs. She'd ride hard, like Clara was with her. That would buy Elias and Clara time to take the dry riverbed out west, hidden by brush and shadow. They'll chase me, Lorna said, saddling up. They always do. Clara grabbed her hand. Don't let them catch you. Lorna smirked. Ain't been caught yet. And then, before anyone could blink away the sting, she leaned down, pressed her forehead to Clara's. You're not fire anymore, she whispered. You're lightning. Strike when it matters. 10 minutes later, the sound of hooves tore. Through the dusk like thunder, Bledsoe and his men rose from their hiding spots, guns drawn, eyes fixed on the lone rider tearing down the ridge. There she is, Scarface roared. Girls with her! Go! Bledsoe barked. Ride her down! 3 of the 5 men took off after Lorna, their figures shrinking fast in the falling sun. That left 2, Bledsoe, and the twitchy one they called Finch. Back. At the ranch, Elias and Clara burst from the rear cellar hatch, crouching low as they moved toward the dried riverbed. Each step was calculated. Every second felt stolen, but Finch had stayed sharp. He saw the flicker of motion between the brush. He squinted, raised his rifle. Crack. Clara turned, raised her revolver, and fired her first shot. It missed, but not by much. Finch flinched. Elias grabbed Clara's arm. Run! They tore through the scrub, boots pounding earth. Finch shouted behind them. A second bullet missed Elias's shoulder by inches. Bledsoe didn't move. He just watched, waited, smiled. By the time Clara and Elias reached the ridge's bend, they were gasping for air. Keep going, Elias said, voice raw. River forks ahead. Clara stopped. No, he froze. What? She pointed back. He stayed behind. Bledsoe. He knows where we're going. Elias looked down the trail. His face hardened. Then he handed Clara the map. Keep running. You. Know the markers. I'm not. He cut her off. You are. I'll deal with him. She stared at him, eyes wide. You'll die. He gave her a half smile. Maybe. But dying ain't the worst thing. Letting them take you again? That is. She didn't cry. Didn't argue. She took the map, turned, and ran. Behind her, Elias Boon turned back toward the ridge, loaded one last shell into his Winchester, and whispered under his breath, She's not alone this time. Far ahead, Lorna had reached the bluffs. She stopped her horse, looked back, and saw the 3 riders closing in like wolves. She breathed deep, kissed the barrel of her empty shotgun, and whispered, One last dance. And then she charged, straight at them. The ridge was quiet, too quiet. Elias Boon stood alone, the barrel of his Winchester gleaming in the last streaks of sun. Bledsoe rode slow, confident, cruel, every step of his horse like a countdown. Figured it was you, Bledsoe called out. Only a fool or a ghost would stand between me and what's mine. Elias didn't move. She ain't yours. Never was. Bledsoe dismounted. You remember Redwind? You remember what she did? Elias' jaw tightened. I was there, Bledsoe sneered. 12 men burned. A foreman's arm melted like wax. You think we'll let a kid do that and walk away? She didn't walk away, Elias said coldly. She crawled, bled, starved, and still kept her soul. You left your humanity behind. For gold and fear. Bledsoe pulled his pistol. And you? What are you now? Some washed-up cowboy playing daddy to a feral fire starter? Elias's eyes flickered, just for a second, to the tattoo just below Bledsoe's collar. A black brand burned into the skin. The Redwind mark. You branded kids like cattle, Elias muttered. I used to turn away. Pretend it wasn't my fight. He stepped forward. But now, I fight. With a roar, Bledsoe fired. Boom! The shot tore through the air, grazing Elias's side. Elias dropped to one knee, bleeding but alive. He returned fire. Crack! His shot hit Bledsoe's leg, knocking him off balance. Both men hit the ground. The earth held its breath. Miles away, Clara reached the canyon fork. She paused, sweat on her brow, blood on her sleeve, but heart steady. She looked back, the horizon, a dark ribbon behind her. She could keep going. She could be free. But she heard Elias's words in her chest. She's not alone this time. And for the first time in her life, she didn't run. She turned back, toward the gunfire, toward the man who never left her behind. At the ridge, Bledsoe crawled toward his pistol. Elias tried to lift his rifle again, but the pain in his side was spreading like fire. You should have stayed out of this, Bledsoe spat. She ain't worth dying for. Elias smiled weakly, blood at his lips. That's where you're wrong. Suddenly, a stone cracked behind them. Bledsoe turned and found Clara standing 10 feet away, her revolver aimed straight at his heart, eyes unblinking, hands steady. I was worth it, she said softly. Bledsoe's sneer twisted. You wouldn't crack. The bullet struck the dirt by his hand. He flinched. I won't miss again, Clara whispered. Elias looked up at her, like seeing sunrise after a long, brutal winter. Bledsoe's hand froze. His grin vanished. He raised both hands in surrender. Clara's gun didn't lower. Elias, she said quietly. Can you ride? He nodded, barely. Then let's go, she said. And if they follow? Clara glanced at Bledsoe, then back to Elias. They won't. As they disappeared into the canyon's throat, leaving dust and dusk behind, Bledsoe sat bleeding, broken, and stunned. And for the first time since Redwind burned, he was afraid. Snow had started falling. Not the gentle kind, but wild, wind-driven flakes. like nature was trying to erase every footprint they left behind. Clara held the reins tight. Elias slumped behind her, barely conscious. Blood had soaked through his coat. She rode hard, jaw clenched, tears threatening, but not falling, because she couldn't fall apart now, not when he'd bled to protect her. Back at the homestead, Lorna stood at the porch steps, rifle in hand, coat flapping like a banner. The distant sound of hooves rumbled across the valley. 5 riders. No flags, no law, just dust and guns and silence. Lorna stepped forward, no fear in her bones, just fury. Papa. Lead rider called out, "Where's the girl?" Lorna didn't answer. Another rider grinned. "Lady, we're taking her, one way or another." Lorna didn't blink. She lifted the rifle. "I buried my husband. I birthed a boy who never came home. You think I'm scared of you?" The second man laughed. "You're bluffing." Lorna aimed, fired. Boom. The man dropped from his saddle like a sack of grain. The other horses reared. The rest froze. Lorna reloaded calmly. "I got 4 bullets left," she said. "Try me." Far up the ridge, Clara watched it all, heart racing. Lorna, the woman who had barely spoken a full sentence since Clara arrived, was holding the line like a war general. Clara wanted to scream, to run down and help. But she had Elias, and Elias needed her. She couldn't fall apart now, so she did what he'd taught her. She planned. She slipped Elias off the horse, laid him against a pine tree, then, without a word, she grabbed his rifle and disappeared into the trees. Below, Lorna faced down the riders. "You killed my brother!" one shouted. Lorna didn't flinch. "No! He killed himself the day he followed a man like Bledsoe," the leader growled. "Enough!" He spurred forward. Lorna fired. Click, empty. He drew his gun. Boom! A shot cracked from the tree line. The rider tumbled from his horse. Confusion exploded. Another shot. Another man fell. "Who's shooting?" They looked around wildly, and then from the shadows stepped Clara, face streaked with dirt, eyes blazing, holding Elias's rifle like it was part of her own body. "I am." Only one rider remained. He looked between Clara and Lorna. Then he threw his gun to the ground and turned his horse. "Cowards don't fight women like them." Lorna walked up to Clara. The snow kept falling. Neither woman spoke at first. Then Lorna, softly, "He taught you well." Clara didn't answer. Her hands trembled, but her eyes, they were fire. Behind them, Elias stirred, barely alive, but smiling faintly. And for the first time since Redwind, Clara felt safe. But deep down she knew this wasn't over, because men, like Bledsoe, they don't stay down for long. The fire crackled low inside the cabin. Elias lay on the bed, pale and sweating. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages, and his breaths came slow, shallow. Clara sat beside him, wringing a cloth with shaking hands. Lorna stood near the stove, grinding herbs with a steady hand. "The bleeding won't stop. If we don't get a proper doctor by morning..." Clara didn't let her finish. She already knew. Outside, the snowstorm had buried the trail. The horses were weak, and the nearest town with a real doctor was 2 days away, if they rode hard. "I'll go," Clara said suddenly, rising. Lorna turned. "No." "I know the mountain pass," Clara insisted. "I remember every ridge, every turn. I survived worse than this." Lorna's eyes narrowed. "Alone?" Clara looked down at Elias, his chest barely rising. "If I don't, he dies. 10 miles south, under cover of night, Bledsoe stitched his own wound by candlelight. His face twisted with pain and hate. You let a girl outshoot you? He growled at the lone rider who returned. You let a child run you off? The rider didn't answer, so Bledsoe struck him, hard. We're taking everything back. The girl, the land, and that coward Elias Boon's head. He grabbed his revolver, eyes gleaming like frostbite. This ends at dawn. Back at the cabin, Clara packed quickly. Rifle, canteen, a single matchbook. Lorna came to the door with a bundle of jerky and a worn scarf. "This was my son's," she said, placing it in Clara's hand. Clara hesitated. "You don't have to." "I already lost one child," Lorna said. "I won't lose you too." They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They just understood. As Clara rode into the storm alone, the cold biting every inch of her skin, she didn't think of the pain. She thought of the moment Elias had first looked at her, not as a burden, not as a broken thing, but as someone worth saving. And now, she'd save him, even if it meant she never came back. Behind her, deep in the trees, boots crushed snow, saddles creaked, and 6 of Bledsoe's best men followed her trail. Silent, fast, lethal, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about erasing the past. Back at the homestead, Elias stirred, whispering Clara's name. Lorna sat beside him. "I let her go," she whispered. "Don't you die before she comes back." But the look in Elias's eyes said something else. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid Clara would face it alone. The wind howled like a dying animal. Clara's horse struggled through the rising snow, hooves sinking deeper with every step. Her scarf clung to her face, eyes squinting through the blizzard. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, only ridden relentlessly. Every heartbeat was Elias, every breath was survival, but she wasn't alone, not anymore. Behind her, 6 riders closed the gap, silent phantoms dressed in black coats, rifles slung low, eyes trained on one thing: Clara. Suddenly, her horse stopped, chest heaving, legs trembling. Clara dismounted, her boots crunching into the snow. They were near Raven Hollow, the canyon edge with a steep drop and a single pass through the cliffs. She had to choose, risk the narrow ledge ahead, or stand and fight. She looked back. Dark shadows moved through the trees. Closer. Closer. No more time. She grabbed her rifle and moved off the trail, ducking behind rocks, heart pounding in her throat. The first rider came into view. He was young, maybe 20, bandana over his mouth. He scanned the ground, rifle ready. He didn't see Clara behind the pine. He never even got to scream. Crack. One shot. He crumpled into the snow. Another man yelled, "Up there!" Clara sprinted. Bullets hissed past her ears. A round grazed her sleeve. Hot. Pain across her arm. But she didn't stop. She reached the narrow pass and wedged herself behind a boulder. Eyes locked down the path, only one way up, one way in. She'd hold it, like Lorna had, like Elias would've. The next man tried to climb. She waited. Let him think he was winning. Crack. He fell backward, crashing into the ice below. 4 left. But her hands were trembling now. Breath fogging up her vision. Blood dripping down her arm. She couldn't hold forever. Suddenly a sound, a whistle. Sharp. Patterned. 3 notes. Clara froze. That was Elias's whistle. She heard it the night he saved her. But he was dying. Alone. Back home. So how? The 4 riders stopped too, confused. Another whistle echoed, closer this time. Then a shot rang out from the cliff above. 1 rider down. Boom. Another fled, but a second shot caught him in the spine. He fell with a scream. The last 2 turned, their horses, and vanished into the trees. Gone. Clara peeked up. There at the top of the ridge, Lorna, holding Elias's old rifle, face cold. Eyes blazing. Clara collapsed in the snow, laughing and crying at the same time. Lorna made her way down carefully, knee-deep in snow. "You didn't think I'd let you have all the fun, did you?" Clara shook her head, stunned. "You followed." "Me?" "No," Lorna said. "I rode ahead." And from behind her, stepping through the swirling snow, Elias, barely standing, propped up by a crutch and determination alone. Clara's eyes widened. "You're alive," he gave her a crooked smile. "You didn't think I'd die before saying goodbye, did you?" They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They just looked at each other. And in that silence, everything was said. The snow had slowed to a whisper, but the silence was not peace. It was warning, the kind of silence that comes before thunder. Clara helped Elias sit against a pine, his breath ragged but eyes sharp. Lorna scanned the tree line, rifle ready. "They'll be back," she said. "No," Elias whispered, voice gravel and fire. "He'll be back." And then they heard it, the steady rhythm of a horse's hooves, not fast, not hurried, confident. Bledsoe. He rode into the clearing like the devil himself, black coat, gray beard, eyes like coals in a dying fire, one pistol on his hip, one shotgun, resting across his saddle, and behind him, no one. He'd come alone. That's how sure he was. He dismounted slowly. No rush. No fear. "Elias Boon," he called. "Look at you, bleeding out on a rock like a wounded pup." Elias didn't flinch. Bledsoe turned to Clara. "And you, the girl I sold for half a sack of corn. Now look at you. Cost me 5 men and a bounty. I ain't never gonna see." Clara stepped forward, rifle trembling in her grip, but her eyes steady as steel. "You lost the day you hurt him," she said. "You lost when you took me." Bledsoe laughed, a dry, ugly sound. "I made you." "No," Clara said softly. "They did." She glanced at Lorna, then at Elias. "I became who I am because they didn't break me." Bledsoe dropped his shotgun in the snow. Hands hovered near his pistol. "Let's see if that backbone holds when I put a bullet in it." Lorna cocked her rifle. "Take one step," she warned, "and I'll send you to hell without your boots." Bledsoe smirked. "Lady, I've been in hell. I built a cabin there." The next moment happened fast. Too fast. Bledsoe drew. Lorna fired. Both guns went off. A crack of thunder in the frozen air. Clara dove. Elias shouted. Then silence. Clara looked up. Bledsoe was standing, blood dripping down his arm. Lorna knelt. In the snow, grazed, not hit bad, but stunned. Bledsoe raised his gun again, aimed at Lorna. "No!" Clara screamed. She ran forward, unarmed now, nothing but her fists. She slammed into Bledsoe, knocking the pistol aside. He roared, grabbed her by the throat, shoved her back against the tree. "You think you matter?" he spat. "You're just a kid." But Clara wasn't a kid anymore. She grabbed the knife from her boot, a gift from Elias weeks ago. "Keep it sharp, keep it close." She drove it straight into Bledsoe's side. He gasped, eyes wide, stumbled back, and Elias fired. One shot, straight through the heart. Bledsoe fell. Not like a monster, like a man who finally ran out of hate. Clara dropped to her knees, shaking. Elias crawled to her, one arm around her back. Lorna came limping, tears in her eyes. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say, except one thing. "We're going home," Elias whispered. And as the sun finally broke through the clouds, its golden light touched Clara's face. For the first time, she smiled without fear. The snow melted faster than anyone expected. 3 days after Bledsoe fell, the cabin felt lighter. Not warmer, but freer. Clara sat by the fire, stroking her bruised throat. The bruises would heal. But the silence? It had changed. No longer something she feared. Now it was hers. Elias hadn't spoken much since that night. He mostly slept. Sometimes he'd wake and ask where Lorna was. Other times he'd just stare at Clara like he couldn't believe she was real. "I don't know how you're still standing," he whispered one morning. Clara smiled faintly. "I had to." Lorna had taken Bledsoe's horse, ridden it out at dawn each day, looking, maybe, for what was left of her own soul. When she returned one evening, Clara was outside chopping firewood. Lorna dismounted. "You're stronger than me," she said, simply. Clara leaned on the axe handle, panting. No, I just didn't have the choice to fall apart. That night, around the fire, all three sat for the first time together. No threat, no danger. Just flickering light, scars, and something like peace. Elias cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said. Clara looked over. You should have the ranch. She blinked. What? You earned it, Elias said. Saved my life. Saved hers, too. Bledsoe's men ain't coming back. But this land's got good bones. Just needs someone who ain't afraid to fight for it. I don't know the first thing about owning land, Clara said. You didn't know the first thing about survival either, Lorna added. And look at you now. Clara stared into the fire. Owning land, a home. Her own name carved into a gate. For so long she was just a number to someone now. Now she could be someone. I want it, she whispered. Then it's yours, Elias said. There was silence again, but this time it was full of meaning. Not the silence before a storm, not the silence after a gunfight. This was the silence that comes when you finally made it home. Later that week, Lorna packed her saddle. Clara hugged her tightly. You sure you won't stay? Lorna shook her head, smiling. You built something good here. I need to see what I can build for myself. But if you ever need me, I know where the North Road leads, Clara smiled. Elias waved from the porch, blanket over his shoulders. Lorna nodded to him. You keep that girl safe. She keeps me safe, he chuckled. As Lorna rode off into the pines, Clara leaned against the porch post. The wind was cold, but inside her, warmth. She wasn't just a runaway anymore, not just a survivor. She was Clara Boon now, owner of the Boon Ranch, and no one would ever sell her again. It had been 2 weeks since Bledsoe's last breath steamed into the cold air, and yet his shadow hadn't fully left the ranch. Clara rose before dawn now. She fixed the fence, fed the chickens, checked on the well. Every day Elias watched from the porch, his cane resting across his lap, a warm blanket tucked around him. You walk like you own the place, he chuckled one morning. Clara looked over her shoulder. I do. But one morning, something strange happened. A rider appeared from the ridge, young, thin, dusty. He didn't speak, just handed Clara a small, battered leather pouch and rode off without a word. Inside the pouch was a letter, scrawled handwriting, smelled faintly of pine and gunpowder. Elias opened it with shaking fingers. Clara watched as his eyes scanned the page, then widened. His lips moved, reading silently. Then he looked up at Clara like he'd seen a ghost. It's from Lorna, he said. Clara stepped forward. What does it say? Elias read aloud. If this reaches you, I need help. I found something, someone from Clara's past. I don't know if it's true yet, but I think there's more to her story than even she knows. I'm heading east, to the borderlands. Meet me at Hollow Creek by the next full moon. Bring Clara. She deserves to know. Lorna Clara's heart froze mid-beat. My past, she whispered. Elias folded the letter. Seems Lorna thinks she's found a piece you lost. But I don't remember anything from before the mines, Clara said. I was just a girl when they took me. Elias's voice was steady. Maybe someone out there remembers you. That night, Clara sat alone in the barn. She stared up at the rafters. All her life, she'd been running from pain. Now the past was riding straight toward her. Could she face it? Would she survive what she'd forgotten? And what if her real name wasn't Clara at all? She clenched her fists. No matter what came, she wasn't the same lost girl anymore. She was strong, free, dangerous if she had to be. And if her past wanted to meet her, it could meet her on horseback. At dawn, Clara stood by Elias's door. He was already awake, as if he knew. I'm going after her, she said. Elias nodded. I'll keep the ranch warm for when you come home." As she saddled up, Clara looked. Out across the land, the ranch, the mountains, the snow melting into rivers, and behind it all, a secret waiting to be unearthed. She kicked her heels gently, and the horse galloped toward the unknown. The wind howled through the canyon like it remembered every name ever buried beneath the dust. Clara rode hard, past pine ridges and dried creek beds. The old trail to Hollow Creek hadn't seen much life in years. By nightfall, she saw the light, small campfire flickering near a twisted sycamore tree. And next to it, Lorna, dirt smudged, hat low, eyes sharp. But there was something else in those eyes. Something haunted. Clara dismounted slowly. "You found something," she said. Lorna nodded, and then, without a word, she handed Clara a worn photograph. It was faded, torn at the edges. But the image was clear enough: a man in a military coat, a woman holding a child, and the child had Clara's eyes. "That's your mother," Lorna said softly. "Her name was Miriam Boon, and the man, he was a soldier, a Union scout." "Your father." Clara's breath caught in her chest. "But I was sold into labor. I don't remember any of this." Lorna knelt by the fire. "You were taken after a raid. The house burned. They thought everyone inside had died." Clara stared at the flames. A mother she couldn't remember, a name she'd never heard spoken, but a face that looked like her. "There's more," Lorna added. "A man in town, a trapper, claims to have seen your mother 2 winters ago, scarred, alive." Clara's voice trembled. "You think my mother's alive?" Lorna met her gaze. "I think we have to find out." The wind picked up, ashes from the fire swirled like ghosts, and Clara knew this wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. But before they could speak again, a branch snapped in the darkness. Lorna stood, hand on her revolver. Clara reached for her knife, more movement, footsteps, then from the shadows. "You don't belong here." A voice, low, menacing. Out stepped a tall figure, worn boots, wide brim hat, gun at his side, eyes like storm clouds. "I warned you, Lorna," he growled. Clara stepped in front of her. "Who the hell are you?" The man smirked. "The past. The part you were never supposed to find." He cocked his gun. "I suggest you both ride out before dawn, or you won't ride out at all." The moon hung low, bleeding pale light across the camp. The stranger's revolver glinted in the firelight. Clara didn't flinch. Her knife stayed sheathed, but her stance was ready. Lorna whispered, "He's from the old cartel that ran the border, mines. He knows who took you." Clara stepped forward. "You came all this way to silence the truth?" The man's jaw tightened. "Truth ain't what you want it to be, girl. It's what we let it be. You were sold. You belong to the pit, and now you're walking around like you're something." Clara's eyes burned. "I'm not something. I'm someone, and you don't get to write my ending." Suddenly, a shot rang out. Not from the man, from Lorna. She'd moved without warning, gun drawn, eyes full of fury. The man staggered back, shoulder torn. Clara didn't hesitate. She lunged, knocking, the pistol from his hand, pressing him to the cold dirt. "Tell me where they took my mother," she demanded. He spat blood. "She didn't die. She escaped. Changed her name. But she ain't the woman you remember. She'll never claim you. She buried you to survive." Clara's breath shook. "That's her choice. But I still deserve to know." They let the man go, bleeding and limping, back into the dark. Clara and Lorna packed their things. As dawn broke, they stood by the ridge, watching the sky ignite in pink and gold. Lorna touched her shoulder. "You still want to go back to the ranch?" Clara nodded. "Not to hide, but to live. And if she's out there, maybe someday she'll come find me." Weeks later, back at the ranch, Elias stood on the porch when Clara returned. She looked older now, steadier, like a tree that had weathered lightning and still stood tall. He smiled. You find what you were looking for? Clara swung down from her horse. Not yet, but I found who I was supposed to become. And that night, as the stars shimmered over Wyoming, Clara wrote a letter. Dear Mama, if you're alive, if you remember a girl with tangled hair and scraped knees, I'm at the ranch with the red windmill. I'm not angry. I'm not lost anymore. I just want to see you. Love, Clara, or whatever name you whispered before I was taken. She sealed it, handed it to Lorna, and looked out at the land she'd reclaimed. Once she was bought like cattle. Now she stood free. Scarred, yes, but powerful, because some girls aren't just survivors. They become legends. Clara. From child labor to legend. Subscribe to Luminous Tales for more unforgettable stories.